All right, my guest today on our CCA Emerging Leaders interview series is Alejandro Ortega, president of the Organization of Latino Actuaries. Alejandro, for this last little bit, I want to talk a little bit about leadership and get some of your views on leadership, and we're going to weave in the topic of diversity into this as well. But in thinking about people that you consider to be successful leaders, what traits do they have, and how do they demonstrate their leadership?
Yeah, I think one of the qualities that a good leader has is vision, right? And vision requires work to develop the vision. I don't think, I know when I've gotten to the point where I can see a little bit further into the future, if you will, it required work. Like I had to sit down and think through things, and sometimes it involves running the numbers or getting outside data sources, but it requires work to develop that vision. And then the next step is getting others to see that vision as well. And I found that that's actually really hard to do. It is not always easy to get others to see your vision. So I think that's one of the skills that a great leader will have, is an ability to show others this vision so that they can also contribute to leading the work in that direction. And I think, being willing to have the conversations that are necessary sometimes to make these things happen. The other part too, for me, is understanding the core underlying issues for whatever problem it is you're trying to solve. I would say a lot of our work early on was trying to understand what were these obstacles. This report that was published was very helpful to us in our early work. Now that we're working with nearly 200 students, we more directly get to see what the issues are and are able to frame our programs to support those issues. But if we're not able to identify the underlying cause of a problem, we're never going to be able to come up with a solution. And so I think part of the leadership is pushing to say, what's the underlying issue? What's the underlying issue? Because it's very easy to scratch the surface and think you found what the cause is, but really it's just the surface. It's a symptom, not the cause of what the underlying problem is.
Yeah. I want to explore what you said a little bit more about vision and how successful leaders can communicate vision. What have you seen leaders do to be able to effectively communicate vision? And maybe the counter to that, what have you seen leaders do that has not been so effective in communicating vision?
That's interesting. I know setting big goals is typically a thing, that you get from the visionaries. I've been reading that Musk wants to go to Mars in 5 years. That sounds like a ridiculous plan, but if that gets people on board to getting us into space faster, then maybe setting a goal like that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, it's clear, right, what his intentions are, and it's when you think about the big picture, big vision, what he's trying to do. It's easy to see if you go work for Elon Musk, the type of things that you'll be working on. That's for sure.
Yep.
What about people that have poorly executed their communication of vision?
Oh, that's interesting. This isn't exactly that, but one of the things that I do see sometimes is folks focusing on the short-term results as opposed to the long-term results. Short-term is nice because you can see it quickly, you can measure it quickly, but a lot of times the short-term goals don't get you to the long-term ones. And so one of the mistakes that I see is folks, instead of focusing on what is the long-term, there's the joke about the guy who lost his keys and he's over by the light pole in the parking lot looking for his keys. And somebody's like, why are you looking over here? Didn't you lose them over there? And he's like, yeah, but this is the only place I have light. Right? You're not going to always be able to measure the things that you're trying to set in your long-term vision. And that's okay. You want to come up with proxies that get you close. But I think focusing on a long-term vision over a short-term is super important.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's, and it's easy to get caught up in the short term because, like you mentioned, a lot of times the results they're there, they're immediately present, they're easy to focus on. Whereas the long term, the trends and things take time to emerge and to know whether or not you're being successful. And it's easy to be distracted by the short term at the sacrifice of the long term. But it is extremely important, like you mentioned, to focus on the long term. I'd like to get your view on the importance of diversity in leadership. How does being a leader from an ethnic population in the profession help others? I mean, you're clearly in that boat.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think about is representation. History is full of groups with power who wanted to help somebody else, but they didn't understand that community and the issues that they were facing. This gets back to understanding the underlying problems. And therefore, any solutions that they put together are not going to solve the underlying issues. You can't solve a problem from outside the community. You need the community to be involved in the decision making. Yeah, again, 19% of the U.S. population is Latino, and yet less than 2% of actuaries are. We're not involved at the level that we should be in the decision making process and the work that actuaries do. And if the actuarial profession wants to serve the Latino community, who's, again, 19% of our clients, we need to incorporate Latinos into the industry. You can't serve a community unless you have people from that community in the decision-making process. And so that's why we think it's important that Latinos are represented in the actuarial profession, along with every other profession.
No, I think that's a really good point, especially when you start thinking about potential stakeholders and being able to identify and appropriately deliver products and solutions to meet needs that a population has. You actually really have to understand what those needs are. And sometimes you only get there by having somebody from that community in that seat actually at the helm. Yeah, I like that. What about from the perspective of, so let's talk about the actuarial profession, and I think it's safe to say that, especially here in the U.S., it's predominantly white. Leaders tend to be predominantly white. So how can a white leader be an ally to people from more diverse backgrounds? What kind of things can they do?
So I think of the Amy Cooper event. This was the woman who called the police on Christian Cooper, the black man who was bird watching in Central Park in New York City this past summer. She was an actuary. And imagine you're a black actuarial candidate and you're trying to get hired on her team. There's no way she's hiring you. She has no desire to. And you don't know that when you're interviewing, and you don't get the job offer, but you don't know why. The thing is, the people around her, they knew why this person wasn't getting an offer. And so we all have Amy Coopers around us that we work with. And I encourage you to say, hey, this is a candidate that we should take seriously, to stand up and point out, no, this is a good candidate. We should hire them for X reason. I can't imagine she would ever say in a meeting, we shouldn't hire him because he's black, right? There's other words that are used to signify why we shouldn't hire this person. But I think it's important for other folks to stand up and say, no, we need to help this person to get this job. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that they're qualified for the role, right? Like, that's a minimum. But given that they are, if people aren't standing up for this candidate, he's not going to get a job there. And so I encourage you, strongly encourage, to stand up for the Blacks and the Latinos who face these obstacles as we try to enter the profession. And it's not just at the entry level either, right? It's as we move up in our careers. I attended the International Association of Black Actuaries annual conference this summer, and they had a speaker there who's a professor. And she talked about the fact, and I forget if she was a postdoc or an assistant professor at this point in her career. She'd been working there for a couple of years at the university, and she hadn't published anything. And finally, somebody took her aside. This is a black woman. Said, look, if you don't publish, you're not going to stay for very much longer. Like, you've got another 2 years and you're done. And she said nobody had told her this. And the white privilege was the other folks get told this early, right? You need to do this if you want to succeed. If you want to get a tenure tracked position, these are the things you need to do. But she wasn't told this. And so I think this translates really easily to our careers. Find a Black or Latino actuary who you work with or who's nearby you, and help them. Be a mentor to them. Encourage them. Give them guidance. Show them what they need to do to take the next step in their career, because we don't have a lot of people looking out for us. And so by going and proactively finding folks and offering to help them, giving them the stuff that they're not told, but yet you need to know to move up to the next level. I think that's huge. And I think that is a great way for white leaders to use their power as allies to support Blacks and Latinos.
And I'll make another plug there too as to why it's important to volunteer with an organization like OLA, because that's how you get to know some of these candidates and these, hopefully, what will turn into actuarial students and analysts, and as they grow within the profession. Because I know with me and my experience participating in a networking session and just the mock interviews, I'll connect with these people on LinkedIn, and it's a great opportunity to stay in touch and try to check in every once in a while. And I mean, that's rewarding on a lot of levels, and really addresses the point that I think you're making there.
Yeah, you actually reminded me of another one that I like to address, the idea that the exams make it a meritocracy. And this one hit a point because an actuarial leader made this comment at a conference a few months ago, that the actuarial profession is a meritocracy. Latinos and Blacks shouldn't have any problem. They can just take the exams like everybody else and do fine. And there was a mention something about having the skills to do so, but it's not. This goes back to access. Our candidates don't have access. They don't find out about the profession. If they find out about it and they're interested, they don't have anybody to talk to, right? You know what? I am interested. Now I need $500. I need to study for 200 hours for this first exam. Lack of access is the main point, right? And so anything that you can do to help our candidates have better access is fantastic. And one of the things that we really value is when professionals can give their time to talk to our students. And so, we talked about the resume review and the mock interviews. Some of those end up turning into mentoring relationships. So it ends up being more than just, here's some tips on how to interview better, good luck. It turns into, here's the things that you should be doing to land more interviews. Here are the things that you should be reading, et cetera. Providing mentorship turns out to be extremely valuable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thinking about your role as a leader within OLA, within the profession, what things have you had to adjust in your leadership style over the years to be successful?
The first one I think of is delegation. I had a hard time delegating when I first got staff because I was like, I can do this better and quicker. And I was ridiculously busy. And so this was not a model that was working very well. And so eventually I learned, if my staff can do it, it's 80% quality, and it takes a little longer, then that is a better way to do things. And once I started doing that, and when I first started, I got frustrated because the quality wasn't there, but it took some time. And once the quality was there, and I realized how much I could lay off of my desk and put it on somebody else's desk, it was huge because it allowed me to be super productive because I could delegate a ton of the work to my staff. And then eventually they had staff too, right? So then they could delegate to theirs. And it allowed us to be efficient and work on the things where we had the most value, right? It is not a good use of my time to be reconciling data, right? Or doing the first pick on loss development factors. But the staff can do that, and then I can focus on more of the strategic issues. So for me, that was one of the early lessons. I think another one is bringing people on board to your ideas. And sometimes that requires off-channel discussions, if you will. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And then part of that too is creating ownership, right? If I discuss an idea with you and you and I sort of polish it a little bit, well, that's not my idea anymore. It's mine and Michael's idea now, right? And so we've created a little bit of ownership sharing there when it gets shared with a broader group. And so I find that is another effective technique in getting programs pushed forward.
I think too, I can definitely relate to that feeling of, well, I can do it quicker and better than pushing that work down. I think that's just inherent in most of us as an actuary, partly because of the way that we start out our careers. Starting out as an entry-level analyst, when you're getting your hands into data and creating models and running liabilities, whatever it might be, you do become proficient at it, and it's hard to take that next step to say, okay, well, now I need to teach somebody else how to become proficient at it so that I can worry about taking the outcomes and communicating those in a productive way to my principals and stakeholders.
Yep.
Right. Excellent. So we had one question come in, Alejandro. So if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, what would you change to encourage more young Hispanic or Latinos to be able to consider an actuarial career?
So, Jerry, the first thing that comes to mind, I would love to get middle schoolers and high school students aware of the profession and how cool it is. I have a hard time figuring out how to make math cool. I did a presentation to my daughter's, she's a fifth grader now, so I think she was in third grade, on the actuarial profession at Career Day. And we ended up using an example of bicycles, and that red bicycles get stolen more often than blue bicycles, and how much would you charge for insurance, and is it fair to charge people with red bicycles more? And the CAS staff came up with this example, and I absolutely loved it because it's, a few of the kids ride their bikes to school, not enough in my opinion. And this is something that they can relate to, and they can understand this risk. And it was, for me, it was neat to be able to present that to them, but I would love if we could get an audience with middle schoolers and high school students to let them know about how interesting this profession is, and let them know that it's an opportunity for them and that they could be successful at it. That's the thing I would love to be able to do, because that's going to be the hard part for us, growing from, say, 6% to 10 or 12%, is getting in front of more high school students and middle schoolers and letting them know about the profession. And so that reach is going to be difficult. Rough numbers, there's a few hundred Latino actuaries in the US. There's something like a few million Latino students graduating from high school each year. How do you get in front of that many students? And so we will never on our own have the scale to do that. And so that's why it's super important for us to partner with organizations that directly get in front of high school and middle school students. And so NHI is the first one that we partnered with. We just created 2 new board positions, pipeline development, which is run by Angie Lee, and community engagement, which is Alfonso Carrillo. And those are about, so the pipeline is about finding the high schoolers and the middle schoolers, and then the community engagement is about connecting with different organizations, which will help us to find them as well. And so we're very serious about continuing to develop those relationships, and I expect that in 2021, we'll develop at least one more serious relationship, if not 2.
No, that's excellent. Alejandro, definitely appreciate your time in joining us today for our CCA Emerging Leaders interview series. I also want to thank Melissa Chaco, Elizabeth Wiley, and Yiling Lin, who are on our Emerging Leaders Community Steering Committee. And thank you to all of you for joining us. If you want more information about the Organization of Latino Actuaries, you can go to www.latinoactuaries.org. As Alejandro mentioned earlier, there's places where you can submit your name to volunteer with the organization in all of the different capacities that we talked about. There's a button where you can make financial contributions to the organization. And Alejandro, we wish you and the rest of the board and the candidates at OLA the best, and appreciate you joining us today, and encourage everyone to pass these interview segments along as we release them on the CCA's website, and join us for more upcoming CCA events in the future.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on here on the CCA platform, and thank you to all of the attendees as well. Thanks for spending the time to listen to our conversation today.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you later.